Hello and welcome to the BlueDolphin webinar where we talk about the functionality that has been added to BlueDolphin the last couple of months, or at least the last year. My name is Tom de Ridder. I'm a principal consultant for Value Blue and I'll be hosting this webinar. We have a small agenda with points we want to discuss. For example, the start page by role, the rotation of shapes, changing text colors, free shapes, AMF, export and import, sharing BPMN work sets, and several other things we'd like to show you. Let's start off with the new user-friendly email. Here's an example of the new format we've chosen, where we try to make it more clear to the user what is expected of the user when he or she gets a activation link. We also added some visuals to make it more attractive, and we also have this in Dutch, English and German. Then to the new login screen. Here's the new login screen where we created a new setup for the identity providers that each site contains. Value Blue identity provider is for Value Blue employees only. Most of you will have the BlueDolphin identity provider, and then in some cases an extra provider, usually with your own logo, your company's logo or organization's logo, to log into your BlueDolphin using your identity provider. First, let's log into BlueDolphin. So the first thing that is different is that we can now set a different start page for each role. So in BlueDolphin you can create different roles for different groups of users. For example, application administrators or architects or read-only users, for example. And we can now assign a start page to each of those users. For example, this start page has been set by the administrator for my role. And I can always go back to this screen by either clicking on the BlueDolphin logo on the left upper hand, or by using the new Start button, the Home button in the ribbon here. We can set this as an administrator by going to Admin and then Roles, and then pick a role. And here you can select the start page that each role should receive. You can pick any URL from within the BlueDolphin site. Usually it's best to select a view that you have prepared specifically for this purpose. So for example, if I click now on the BlueDolphin logo, we will go back to the start page. And this will be different for every role where you set a different URL. Let's go and look at the scaling that we tried to fix. Previously, if you had a view that did not fit within the bounds of your browser window, it would either be too small or too large. We've changed that so that when either you're zoomed in or zoomed out, if you refresh the view, it will always default back to a scaled view, which means that BlueDolphin will try to put the entire view into one browser window. For example, if I open another view, which I can change, you'll see that if I try to move this a little bit more outside of the view that we have, and we then reload the page, you see that we'll try to re-image or try to make it fit within the browser window. So that's automatic scaling of views. One thing we also added is the following. Let's go back to the main page and select the BlueDolphin function overview. And if we use conditional layout to highlight certain object properties or relationships on a diagram, we can now have the legend, and we can also filter the legend. For example, I can turn off the colorization of the objects on the screen so that they don't only have a white color. We can turn off all the legend colors and highlight a single color, for example, or multiple colors. This is really ideal for presenting and showing, telling a story about the data you want to display. So you can turn several views on and off by using the eye icon. This also works with relationships. We don't have relationships on this page, but if you have a page with relationships, that will also work for that. So, and you can also reset the entire legend back to original form. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility when telling a story or visualizing certain ideas in a single view. Now moving along, if I create a new view and we put some objects on the view, for example, BlueDolphin, some other products or application components, we've implemented the guidelines for objects. So it makes it easier to align objects to other objects. So as soon as you align an object next to another object, it will show you helping lines, helping you decide where to place an object. So it makes it easier for placement. This can be done with or without the grid. I can also turn off the grid and it will also work. So this allows for working off the grid while still having the possibility to align your objects more freely. So the next thing we added to the new functionality is that we are now able to create more shapes than just a rectangle and a circle. For example, I can create a truck here, and I can create, for example, a building somewhere. And we can do anything with these shapes. We can resize them, we can color them, we can put text in them, and we can change the color of the text. Or we can change the size of the text. We can change the alignment of the text. For example, I can make this text appear left upper corner or right lower, for example. So that makes it a little bit more flexible. What we also can do is create relations between those shapes. For example, let's say I want to visualize this truck going to a factory. I can now create a relation between those two objects. And there's a variety of line shapes you can choose, none of them which are Archimate related. Let's choose this one. And we can use this relationship line the same way we can use them with Archimate objects or BPMN objects. And what we are planning to do in the future is that we will allow you to create Archimate objects out of these free shapes, and then also create Archimate relations from these existing relations. So that will allow you to kind of draft your story before you create Archimate objects. The conversion from free shapes to Archimate objects is not yet available. But we are thinking about releasing that in the future. You can also have text on these lines, just as you can do in Archimate. Furthermore, the shapes can also be rotated, like so. Same can happen with the shape we had earlier, the rectangle and the circle. And there's also the possibility of grouping objects together. like so. Just as you could do earlier with Archimate objects. Some of the enhancements we also done in text boxes. For example, I can now create a text and I can resize that text, make it bigger. Oh, excuse me. And we can also have a text color, obviously. So there's some, you can basically do the same thing with text on any object. You can also do that on an Archimate object. Make a larger text or color the text. One other thing we added to the Archimate world is that when you do put a relationship between two objects, it is now possible, first of all, to switch the direction by right-clicking and then choosing Switch Directions. So it then effectively changes the direction of the relation. Obviously, this is not possible for all relationships, but relationships that have a certain direction, this is possible for. The other thing we've added is that you're now able to use a gesture to change the relationship target. For example, let's say I want to change this line from intercom to InDesign. I can drag it and then drop it, and it will change the relationships. This is also in the model itself, so it's not just on the view, but also in the model. Furthermore, we have added the possibility to export a view to AMEV. AMEV is an Archimate Exchange file format which you can use to import and export views and objects from other tools, other architecture tools. You can do it by choosing a view, then pressing the 3 buttons, choose download, and the last option will be AMEV. And this will create a XML file which you can then use to import in another architecture tool or import it back into BlueDolphin if you'd like. Supported objects are only Archimate objects and Archimate relationships. We cannot export and import these shapes, the new shapes, because that is not specified in the AMEV file format. It's simply not possible. We are, however, planning to create an export functionality for BlueDolphin itself, making sure that you can export a view and then import the view with all related objects and data into BlueDolphin again. Once again, that's not possible now. We are planning to put that on the roadmap. We also added some enhancements to BPMN. So let's try and find a business process and create a BPMN view for that. You might know that there's 2 ways of creating a BPMN process. You can go to a specific object, and then in the Views tab, you can select Create New BPMN View. It's also possible to just start a new view, like so, and then choose the process itself. You can do either way. Now, one of the things we added is that you have now the possibility to create text inside of a swimming lane. But I should first create a swimming lane then. Let's put in a swimming lane. Let's choose customer, and then we can use text inside of BPMN swimming lane. Here you go. So that makes it easier to annotate some of the stuff you want to explain in a BPMN view. We also, next to the text that we can now put on a swimming lane, is also the possibility that we now are able to share a view. For example, if I want to share this view with somebody else, I can now share it, and that user can then also use this BPMN view and change it We can even work together inside of the view, just like we can in Archimate objects, Archimate views. Another feature that we've added is the inclusion of the back and home button. Now the home button does the same as the BlueDolphin logo. It goes back to the home page or the start page for this role. The other buttons, let me go back to my shapes example. The other button is actually a back button, so that will go back to the previous view. For example, if we create another a link to another view, the one that we just created, for example, the Vpn View that we just created, sample process, let's say we put that in here, and we go into that process view, we can now use the back button to go immediately back into the view we were in previously, like so. And then we can also go back a little bit further because we started off, or go back to the previous view and then go back to the index. So the back button is actually a breadcrumb of all the views that you visited before, and you can go back in time to make it easier to navigate the view structure. It also means that you don't actually need a back button on your view, something that most people did previously because there was no real way of getting back into a previous view. You can now just go back by using the back button. Also, if you right click the back button, you'll see all the pages you visited. So this is actually the breadcrumb that I was talking about. So I can go back to the index, or I can go back to where I came from. So it's easier to navigate this way. It also allows for deep navigation without getting lost in the whole navigation structure. And then again, the start button does the same, goes back to the initial view. The final stuff I want to talk to you about is about that we are now not allowing non-Archimate 2.1 relations to be defined. Previously, it was possible to create relationships between any object that you wished. We now are conforming to Archimate 2.1, meaning that I cannot have certain relations between certain objects. For example, if I were to add a composition relationship definition, for example, between actor and something else. Let's see, where's actor? Here you go. There's no possibility anymore because it's either there's no possibility to do it, or all the relationships that were possible are already added to the model. I think this is the case because in here you'll see that actor has a composition relation with actor, which is the only one that is possible. For example, I can also look at the flow relationship and try to add a new combination there. Let's also add actor there. And then there's a smaller list of object types that I can choose to create a flow relationship. So we now conform to Archimate 2.1 when defining relationships definition. This means that current relations still work and current relationship definitions still work, but it's no longer possible to create relationship definitions that are not Archimate 2.1 compliant. And finally, we have done a lot of stuff under the hood for BlueDolphin last year. For example, we are now moved to Service Fabric for the microservices architecture that is under BlueDolphin. We migrated from the old cloud services on the Azure Cloud Platform to the newer Azure Service Fabric cluster, which allows us to scale BlueDolphin a whole lot better than that was previously possible. And we are hoping that we can use this technology to support the increasing number of users that we expect in the coming years. So from our part, that was the webinar. If you have any questions regarding this webinar or after watching the video, please feel free to contact us using either support or the chat inside of BlueDolphin. And for now, I wish you a very pleasant day, and till next time. Bye bye.